Well, yeah, let's take it back to a big yes that set the course of both of our lives. If I'm not mistaken, from what I read online, Seasonal Magic, the kind of holding company for Spirit Halloween, which is how we met and why we've known each other for so long, was founded in 1993. So we're looking at, I think, the 30th anniversary this year that's been a thing. Tell us how Spirit Halloween here in New Mexico, or here in the Southwest America, has grown into this Halloween empire. How did that start? What was the inception of Halloween here in New Mexico?
God, man, I don't truly capital G God. Like, it was by the grace of Him. Like, it was a blessing that came at the right time, and that my parents had the charisma and fortitude and just I'll say it like this: they had the balls to try. But the way it came about was, my dad is, and mom really have always been entrepreneurial, but they were kind of a hard luck story. So, all throughout my childhood and well before, I'm the youngest, they really struggled financially. And they took on all these different endeavors that they were passionate about. Like at one time they owned a radio station and a newspaper in this small town called Safford, Arizona. And my dad was this amazing, he had a morning show and he ran this newspaper, sold all the advertising, and he had this amazing charismatic personality, and people always were like magnetized to him.
And he still does.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And he was so good at that, but he was just like, he was this big thing in a small market, and it was really hard to monetize, and they put their life savings into it. And even though it was amazing, it never went anywhere. And so kind of tail tucked between their legs, my dad took a bunch of like odd end jobs, just trying to provide, he worked at Keebler, stocking shelves, and he had, and still has, sleep apnea, but this is before sleep apnea was a thing and people really knew what sleep apnea was. And so I have these vivid memories of driving in the car with my dad and him just full on falling asleep while driving. And because of this, he had a really hard time holding a job. And so he's constantly bouncing around from job to job. And although he is this amazing person, he couldn't hold a job because he wasn't getting any sleep. And his vital organs were literally shutting down when this science behind sleep apnea started coming about, and they learned about CPAP machines and all of this. Anyways, so during this time, he was, my mom was working in economic development up at the state in Santa Fe, and she was driving every day, and she was really the breadwinner of the family. Again, my dad couldn't hold a job, and sacrificing so hard. I remember these are the type of memories that really inspire me, if I'm being honest. But I remember she had this Bronco 2. That's the car that's burned into my memory of my mom in my childhood. And I remember that the starter didn't work on it, but it was a manual transmission vehicle, and we didn't have the money to fix the starter. And so we always had to park on a downhill so that we could push the car so she could pop the clutch to start it. And my dad, as best as he and my dad is the most amazing person. Like, he really is. He's one of these guys that is so selfless, and everything has really always been for his family. And he was grasping at straws to keep jobs and just couldn't get it. And he ended up working as he was managing these Allsup's gas stations and Circle K's and wherever else. Like, it was literally just convenience store to convenience store. And as the story goes, of course, I have no recollection of this actually happening because they shielded it from me. But my dad actually got held up. He was working a graveyard shift at one of these convenience stores and got held up and basically locked in a bathroom and then robbed. And it was like the ultimate wake up call for him. And it was also like this, like I could have died, and here I am working in these convenient, like my life has to amount to something more than what it is right now. And around this time, and my dad's always been kind of he's a connections guy, much the way that I am. Like people have always been his passion. And he had this long-lasting friendship with this couple, Tamara and Joe Marver. Well, Joe Marver and Tamara, they lived in the Bay Area in California, and they had these dress shops, like bridal dress shops, and they were decently successful. But Joe Marver was like this ultimate. I think he was a Jewish man, but he was like this savant businessman. He was always looking for the next thing. And I don't know how he came upon the concept of Halloween, but somehow he came about this idea that he wanted to start a specialty Halloween retailer. And he cracked the code. So evidently these dress shops, they have a lull in the fall. And so he would convert his dress shops into these Halloween stores, and he would buy these Halloween goods from, Halloween conventions or overseas. He built a network in which he could buy Halloween goods. And much to his delight, and I think somewhat surprise, the stuff was selling, and it was selling really well. Because at that time, Halloween was kind of just a gimmick. Like it was maybe an aisle in Walmart, but there was no true specialty store that's all they focused on. And so he just saw this little niche in the market and was by all means, very successful. So he started thinking about how he could grow this business and develop kind of what we'll call a franchise model. And he started reaching out to his connections, and he put together this VHS tape that he would send to his friends basically and say, like, here's what we're doing. Let me know if you want to be a part. And Joe stopped through Albuquerque, and at least this is the way that I've heard the story, and I hope I'm recounting it correctly, and gave my dad this VHS tape, and they popped it in, and my dad immediately, again, he's grasping for anything that's some like glimmer of hope for him to do something other than what he's doing now. And he's like, man, like, I think I could do that. Like this is kind of cool. It's kind of niche. And I think this is something that I would like to try. And so Joe said, if you want to do this, you need to come and spend a Halloween season out with me and really learn the business. And so he had a handful of these, and he actually had some really, really amazing people that he had hired to help build this business. And many of them are still to this day working there. Like Ann Sullivan, who you have met at some of these spirit meetings in New Jersey and stuff. She's an OG. Like wow. She's been since the very beginning. And so anyway, he brought my dad out, and my dad couldn't believe it. He's like, we're on these old Casio registers, and people are buying these little rubber, cockroaches and squeaky rats and crazy stuff. And he's like, it was the most fun I've ever had. And he was super inspired by that time there. But again, we had no money. And when I say no money, I'm like, we had the opposite of money. And so we didn't have the funds to even start this thing off. And so what Joe came up with was actually really brilliant. And it's really the foundation that catapulted Spirit Halloween into what it is now. But he created what is known as a consignment operation. And a lot of people say, like, they know about the consignment idea, right? Like, you can consign your furniture. Like, I own this piece of furniture, but I want to sell it, so I'll take it to this showroom, and I'll sell my furniture at this showroom, and then the showroom will keep a certain amount of whatever I sold it for. Right. And so, like, that was a very traditional consignment model. It's where the person who owned the shop really didn't own any of the stuff that was in the building, but they got a cut of whatever they sold.
Right.
And whatever they didn't sell, well, they would send it back and they would get credit for it. Or they would say, look, we didn't sell it, so take your couch back out of this furniture store. And so Joe, being the savant that he was, he didn't really want financing to be the barrier to help his friends achieve this goal of, of expanding this business. And so he developed this consignment model for Halloween where he would foot the bill for the merchandise. Now you would have to go and you'd have to secure a location, and you would have to pay your employees, and you would have to pay your insurance and all of these things. But the product itself, he owned it. And if you sold it, you would keep a portion of the proceeds, and the rest of it would go to him. And it was great because it allowed people who had not a lot of money to really get their foot in the door with a pretty minimal startup cost. And so my parents went to my grandfather and asked him for a small loan, which allowed us to get our first lease and pay our employees and kind of get it off the ground. And Joe would send the semi truck full of Halloween goods, and we would sell what we could, and then we would send back what we couldn't. And the store was by no means like a barn burner. Like, it wasn't like this instant success, but we sold some. And although I don't know that we made any money that first year, or I don't know that we made money the first 10 years, honestly, but
wow.
It gave my dad this glimmer in his eye where he had control of his destiny. And he wasn't working for the man anymore. And he had control of who he hired. He had control of what spaces he was going to, like, it was the perfect fit for him and his skill set. And since then, I mean, every single year they've added store after store after store. And so that's really just the way it started. It was first my mom and dad bootstrapping it, and the kids, my brother, sister, and I just causing havoc in the store. And basically that was our free daycare. And then we were child labor. And then we've just kind of grown up in this business. And the other thing that I have to commend my parents for is they've used this business as a conduit to instill in us so many values that I think otherwise are so hard as a parent to instill in a child. And I can't tell you what a blessing this company, this business has been for us as we've grown it, because now, like, it's a third generation, right? Like, I'm bringing my kids into these stores. And anyway, to get back, this is my ADHD mind working. Like, get back to where I was talking about, like, to my parents should be commended, is they knew about the multiplication of effort. And they knew to grow this, they needed my brother, my sister, and I to take big roles, to take ownership, and they needed to give us wings and then let us fly so that we could grow this business way faster than him and my mom could. So it's awesome because, all three, my brother, sister, and I, we all worked for my dad. I have very vivid memories of my dad and his management style, which in many ways still guides me to this day. And then I worked for my sister, because then, now my sister became a store manager. She's 8 years older than me. So little brother's working for big sister. And then sister goes off to college, or sister moves to different city. Now sister starts a store of her own in new city. Now I'm working for big brother, who's 6 years older than me. So now I'm working under my brother. I'm learning his management style. I'm now working with a totally different style of leadership. And then boom, Brennan's gone. He goes to law school at UNLV, and he's starting to sprout his own little branches out in Las Vegas and starts growing the business out there. And now little CK turns 18 and really like I didn't deserve it. I was not mature enough to be running a store, and I made so many mistakes.